Imagine a world where the sun never truly shines. You are walking through a town, but the sky is a perpetual gray, a muted dome of ash and dust. The air is thick, carrying the faint scent of sulfur and damp earth. This is not night, nor is it day. It is a lingering twilight, an unnatural dusk that has settled over everything, a consequence of mountains that once roared to life. You hear the crunch of fine grit beneath your shoes with every step. Look closely at the buildings. They are coated in a layer of fine gray powder, a silent testament to a world forever changed. This is the story of communities that learn to live under a dim sun, towns suspended in an unending volcanic gloaming. You will discover their resilience, their adaptations, and the whispers of hope that persisted in the perpetual dusk. You stand on the edge of a memory, a geological upheaval that ripped through the very fabric of the sky. Before the never-ending twilight, there was a dawn like any other, perhaps hinting at a crisp, clear day. Then the earth began to rumble. Not a gentle tremor, but a deep, guttural growl that vibrated up through the soles of your feet, through your very bones. You would have felt it first, a low thrumming that grew, a sound from the planet itself, awakening. The ground around you would have convulsed, a slow, deliberate heave, then a shuddering jolt that sent cracks spiderwebbing across the baked earth. Imagine the sound now, a chorus of groans from the bedrock, like colossal beasts stirring from an ancient slumber. This was not merely an earthquake. This was the mountain speaking, issuing its first, ominous warning. Then came the explosion. Not a single sharp crack, but a sustained, deafening roar, a sound that tore through the air, reverberating in your chest and forcing the breath from your lungs. You would have instinctively looked up, but not for long. A colossal column of ash and superheated gas, a pyroclastic monster, began to boil upwards, clawing at the heavens. It was a terrifying, beautiful spectacle of raw power. White-hot gases would have mingled with pulverized rock, creating a furious, dark plume that climbed higher and higher, dwarfing anything man-made, reaching into the stratosphere. The sun, just moments before a familiar orb, would have been instantly swallowed, not by night, but by an immediate, suffocating darkness. This was not a sudden flick of a switch, but a terrifying, rapid descent into an altered reality. The first ash would have begun to fall, not as a gentle dusting, but as a dense, gritty rain. You would have felt it immediately, fine, abrasive particles stinging your exposed skin, accumulating on your eyelashes, filling your nostrils with a dry, acrid scent. The air itself would have grown heavy, thick with suspended particulate matter, making every breath a conscious effort. It was a tangible presence, a suffocating blanket descending from above. The soundscape of your world changed utterly. The roar of the mountain would have continued for hours, sometimes days, a relentless, primal shriek punctuated by deeper, seismic thuds. Imagine the relentless pounding, the way the sound would echo off what few buildings remained standing, creating a cacophony of geological fury. Even the birds would have fallen silent, their calls drowned out, their world transformed into a gray, toxic maze. You would have heard only the mountain's wrath and the whisper of falling ash, a sound like a million grains of sand raining down on every surface. Water, when it came, would not have offered relief. Instead, it would have mixed with the ash, creating a heavy, sticky mud that plastered itself to everything. You would have moved through this new, viscous landscape with difficulty, your steps heavy, your clothes saturated. The structures around you, once vibrant with color, would have taken on a uniform, desolate gray, their roofs burdened by the accumulating weight. Every surface became a canvas for the volcano's dark artistry. The sky, once a canvas for clouds and sunshine, became a permanent, oppressive ceiling. The stratospheric injection of aerosols and fine ash particles was so immense, so widespread, that it formed a persistent veil. Sunlight struggled to penetrate this atmospheric shroud. You might see a faint, diffuse glow at midday, a pale ghost of the sun, but never its direct warmth or illuminating brilliance. The world was now illuminated by a perpetual eerie dusk, a muted, melancholic illumination that never truly brightened. For the inhabitants of these towns, life became a negotiation with this new reality. The perpetual twilight wasn't just an aesthetic change. It was a fundamental alteration of their environment, their agriculture, and their psychology. Imagine waking each morning to the same dimness, the lack of a true sunrise to mark the passage of time. Calendars still existed, but the rhythm of day and night, etched into humanity's very being, was broken. You would live by clocks and by the internal cues of your body, rather than by the sun's journey across the sky. The lack of direct sunlight meant colder temperatures. The earth, shielded from the sun's radiant energy, slowly began to cool. You would feel a persistent chill in the air, a damp cold that seeped into your bones, even on what would have once been a warm summer day. Fires would burn longer and more often, not just for cooking, but for warmth and for the psychological comfort of their flickering light against the encroaching gloom. The demand for fuel would soar, adding another layer of struggle to daily existence. Agriculture, the very foundation of many of these communities, faced an unprecedented crisis. Plants, deprived of adequate sunlight for photosynthesis, withered and died. The ash itself, while eventually contributing to fertile soil over centuries, was initially a devastating blanket, suffocating young shoots and making cultivation almost impossible. You would witness fields that once flourished now lying fallow, choked by gray powder, their green vitality replaced by a uniform desolation. The specter of famine loomed large, forcing communities to adapt rapidly, to find new sources of sustenance, or to face unthinkable choices. The air itself remained a constant challenge. Even after the initial heavy ashfall subsided, fine particles lingered, suspended indefinitely. Every breath you took carried the faint taste of sulfur and minerals. Lung ailments would become commonplace, a constant reminder of the air you breathed. You would learn to cover your mouth and nose as a matter of routine, tying scarves or cloths across your face whenever you ventured outside, a permanent accessory in this dust-laden world. The sound of the mountains, though lessened, would never entirely disappear. Even years later, a low grumble might occasionally emanate from the earth, a faint tremor that would send a shiver down your spine. It was a constant reminder of the geological power that had reshaped your world, a memory etched into the landscape and the collective consciousness. The moan was not just the sound of the eruption, but the persistent hum of a world forever altered, a lament from the very ground beneath your feet. Yet, despite this profound transformation, life persisted. People learned to navigate the dimness, their eyes adjusting to the low light, their other senses sharpening. You would rely more on sound, on touch, on the subtle changes in air currents to find your way. Buildings would be adapted, perhaps with more windows to capture every scrap of available light, or with internal layouts that minimized the need for constant artificial illumination. The human spirit, faced with such overwhelming adversity, found ways to adapt, to innovate, to endure. The sky above might have been eternally gray, but beneath it, the pulse of life continued, a testament to an unyielding will. This was their twilight, their challenge, and their enduring story. You stand now at the precipice of memory, looking back to the moments just after the earth groaned its final, cataclysmic sigh. The true silence was not immediate. First came the roar, then the distant rumbling, a tremor in the very fabric of your being. But soon, an insidious quiet began to fall, not the peaceful hush of a slumbering world, but an unsettling heavy blanket of stillness, broken only by the whispering descent of the ash. Imagine it with me. Look up. The sky, once a canvas of blue or the familiar tapestry of night, is now an oppressive, uniform gray, thick and bruised. And then it begins. Not a sudden deluge, but a ceaseless, gentle fall, like an endless snowstorm of the darkest, finest powder. The particles are so minuscule, so numerous, they seem to hang in the very air, catching on eyelashes, clinging to hair, settling on clothing. You breathe it in, a gritty metallic taste coating your tongue, scratching at your throat. Each inhalation feels like drawing in a mouthful of fine sand, and the cough that follows is a persistent, nagging reminder of the invisible enemy now permeating your every breath. Step outside your dwelling. The world is transforming before your very eyes, not with the dramatic violence of the initial blast, but with a slow, relentless, suffocating grace. Every surface begins to disappear beneath this new gray mantle. The vibrant red tiles of your roof, the rough-hewn timber of your fence, the green leaves of the trees that once dappled your yard with sunlight, all are steadily, inexorably swallowed by the advancing veil. Footsteps leave crisp, temporary indentations in the soft, yielding layer that covers the ground, each step stirring a small puff of fine dust into the already laden air. The air itself is dense, heavy, almost viscous. It muffles sounds, creating an eerie, muted world where voices seem to lose their carrying power and distant noises are swallowed whole. The familiar chirping of birds has ceased, replaced by a profound, unnatural quiet. Even the wind, when it picks up, does not whistle or howl, but rather sighs mournfully, swirling the ash into ghostly drifts that pile against walls and fences, mimicking winter snow but without the cleansing promise of melting. This is the eternal twilight you now inhabit, not just because the sun is hidden, but because the very air is an opaque curtain. The dimness that permeated the previous segment now has a physical, tangible source. You extend a hand and the ash settles on your palm, soft yet abrasive, cool yet dry. Gets into everything. Doors and windows, no matter how tightly sealed, cannot keep it entirely at bay. A thin film quickly coats furniture, floors, the inside of your eyelids. Every object you touch leaves a gray residue on your fingers. The ground itself is treacherous. The ash, especially when damp, becomes a slick, unforgiving surface, turning familiar paths into perilous slides. When dry, it shifts and billows with every movement, creating clouds that momentarily blind and disorient. Crossing the town now requires an entirely new set of senses. You learn to shuffle, to test the ground before each step, to feel for solid resistance beneath the soft layer. Your ears strain for the unique crunch of a different surface, perhaps the firmer ground of a pathway recently cleared, or the sound of another person moving nearby. The monumental task of clearing begins immediately, and it never truly ends. Imagine waking each day to find your doorstep buried under a fresh accumulation, your rooftop groaning beneath an ever-increasing weight. Tools are improvised, wide, flat wooden shovels, brooms made of stiff bristles, even simply your hands. Lines of people form, passing buckets or baskets filled with the fine gray powder, moving it from one place to another, a Sisyphean labor under an unyielding sky. Where do you put it? The sheer volume is overwhelming. It is piled in empty lots, creating artificial hills, gray dunes that slowly begin to reclaim the landscape, dwarfing the very homes they once threatened to crush. For the young and old, the infirm, the challenge is immense. Breathing becomes a constant effort. Simple cloth masks are worn, offering meager protection against the insidious particles that irritate lungs and cloud vision. The world outside is a constant assault on the senses, a reminder of vulnerability. Yet life must continue. Children still need to be fed, water must be found and filtered. The necessity of survival drives innovation. Wells are covered, rainwater collected in carefully sealed containers. Food storage becomes a priority, guarding against contamination. The very architecture of the town shifts in response. Roofs that were once gently sloped for rain now need to be reinforced, or redesigned with steeper angles to shed the relentless fall of ash. Gutters become clogged almost instantly, demanding constant attention. Windows, once sources of light and fresh air, become weak points, allowing the fine dust to infiltrate. Some are boarded up, others are sealed with cloth and resin, turning interiors into hermetically sealed, dimly lit cocoons, reliant on oil lamps or other sources of artificial light even at what would normally be midday. The sense of time begins to warp. Without the daily rhythm of sunrise and sunset, the boundaries between day and night blur. Life becomes a continuous, subdued existence under the perpetual gray. Clocks become more than mere timekeepers. They are anchors to a concept of order in a world plunged into atmospheric chaos. You learn to tell the passage of hours not by the sun's position, but by the subtle shifts in the wind, the changing temperature, the sounds of your neighbors engaged in their endless chores. The once vibrant market square, a hub of activity and color, is now a desolate expanse, grayed and muffled. Goods are covered, stalls are sparsely populated. The sounds of commerce are hushed, replaced by the soft scraping of shovels and the muted conversations of weary inhabitants. What crops survived the initial blast are now coated, their leaves choked, their fruits made gritty and inedible. Agriculture, the lifeblood of many communities, is crippled. Food must be sourced from further afield, if possible, or rationed carefully from what little was salvaged and stored. This ash veil is not just a geological phenomenon, it is an omnipresent character in your life. It shapes your movements, dictates your work, permeates your air, and subtly alters your very perception of reality. It is a constant, physical manifestation of the disaster, a perpetual monument to the volcano's power. You live not just in a town but under the ash, breathing it, walking on it, clearing it, adapting to its relentless presence. It becomes the new normal, a heavy gray blanket woven into the very fabric of existence. Your skin, your clothes, your home, your very outlook on the world are tinted by its pervasive hue. This is the world that lives in perpetual ashen twilight, where the air itself has become a palpable presence, a thick gray breath upon the land. Now step into that twilight. The sun, once a vibrant painter of mornings and a gentle guide to evenings, is now a distant memory, a faint ghost behind the perpetual cloud. It is not utter darkness, no. Instead, you live under a sky the color of a bruised plum, or perhaps a perpetually overcast winter afternoon, stretched across every hour of every day. This is the new normal, a muted spectrum where greens are dull, blues are absent, and reds are swallowed by the pervasive gray. You walk down streets where familiar landmarks now seem alien, softened by the diffuse light, their edges blurred as if seen through a dirty window pane. Shadows, once sharp and distinct, are now weak, smudged suggestions. They cling close to buildings, hesitant, as if unsure of their own existence. The air itself feels thick, not just with ash, but with an almost palpable quiet, the usual vibrancy of daylight hushed and absorbed by the oppressive overhead blanket. Sounds too are muted. Footsteps on the ash-covered ground make a soft, crunching whisper. Voices carry differently, a little more strained, perhaps, in the effort to pierce the atmospheric density. Your days are governed by this lack of true light. Mornings do not dawn with a golden blush, but merely lighten from an inky black to that omnipresent, weary gray. You wake in what feels like an extended dusk, and you go to bed as the world deepens back into a shade of slate. The rhythms of your body, once attuned to the rising and setting of a bright orb, are confused, protesting. Sleep becomes a muddled affair. Some find themselves perpetually tired, others grapple with insomnia, their internal clocks irrevocably broken. The simplest tasks become Herculean efforts. Lighting your home is a constant battle against the encroaching gloom. Oil lamps burn through their fuel at an astonishing rate, casting flickering, unreliable pools of yellow light that barely push back the shadows. Candles are precious, saved for essential moments. Many resort to simple firelight when possible, its orange glow a warm, if temporary, defiance against the external bleakness. But even these efforts often feel insufficient, a mere gesture in the face of the overwhelming dimness. Outdoors navigation is tricky. The familiar paths you once strode with confidence now demand caution. You squint, trying to discern the uneven terrain, the subtle changes in elevation, the discarded debris hidden by the perpetually low visibility. Accidents are more common. A misstep on a loose patch of ash, a stumble into a forgotten ditch. Children are kept closer, their boisterous play somewhat subdued by the need to be seen and heard in the muted world. They learn a different kind of alertness, a reliance on touch and sound as much as sight. Working outdoors is transformed. Farmers, if they still have viable land, toil under the perpetual twilight, their faces grim, their movements slow and deliberate. The lack of direct sunlight stunts what little vegetation remains. Crops struggle to photosynthesize, yielding poor harvests. Fishing too is altered. The reflective surface of the water, once a mirror for the sky, now merely reflects the gray, making it harder to spot telltale signs of fish or navigate shallow waters. Every industry that relies on natural light or clear conditions suffers profoundly. For those whose work moved indoors, the challenge is simply shifted. Workshops are lit by expensive, smoky lamps, the air growing heavy and stale. Craftspeople strain their eyes, their hands moving with the acquired precision of years, but the constant need for artificial light takes its toll. Headaches are common, as is a persistent ache behind the eyes, a dull, nagging reminder of the world outside. The very color of things changes. Your clothes, once brightly colored, now seem to take on a dusty, muted hue. The vibrant patterns of a blanket, the cheerful paint on a door, all appear faded, as if seen through a sepia filter. This subtle, pervasive loss of color is more than aesthetic. It is a constant visual reminder of what has been lost, a slow draining of the world's vitality. Social life adapts. Gatherings are often earlier, trying to capitalize on what little effective light there is. People congregate in homes around the flickering hearth or a cluster of lamps, their faces illuminated in shifting patterns, making conversation feel more intimate, more pressing. There is a greater reliance on storytelling, on shared memories of a brighter past, to conjure warmth and connection in the present. The absence of a clear day and night cycle blurs the lines between work and rest, making scheduled social events a more conscious, deliberate effort. The psychological impact is perhaps the most insidious. The perpetual twilight fosters a sense of melancholy, a quiet despair that settles over the community like the ash itself. The absence of the sun, that ancient symbol of hope and rebirth, weighs heavily on the spirit. Days bleed into one another without the sharp demarcation of dawn and dusk, contributing to a feeling of timelessness, of being trapped in an eternal present. Some become withdrawn, their spirits crushed by the unending gloom. Others, however, find an unexpected resilience. They discover new ways to bring light, not just physical light, but emotional warmth, into their lives. Children born into this world know no other reality. For them, the sun is a myth, a story told by elders. They see drawings and hear descriptions of a sky of brilliant blue, of light that casts sharp, dancing shadows, and they try to imagine it. Their games are adapted to the dimness, their eyes accustomed to seeing in low light, their senses perhaps sharper in other ways. They learn to navigate a world that is always muted, always a little bit hushed. Their understanding of color, of vibrancy, is different, shaped by this constant gray filter. But even in this persistent twilight, human ingenuity and spirit find a way. You learn to conserve fuel for your lamps, to maximize the faint light that penetrates the ash. You might paint the interior walls of your home in lighter colors to reflect what light there is, or hang reflective surfaces. You develop a keener sense of hearing, a more sensitive touch, to compensate for diminished sight. You learn to listen to the whispers of the wind through the ash, to discern the faint crunch of footsteps that signal a neighbor approaching. Community becomes even more vital. Shared burdens are lighter burdens. Neighbors check on neighbors, ensuring no one is lost in the gloom, physically or emotionally. Communal meals, once a celebratory occasion, become a regular necessity, a way to share resources and stave off isolation. The very act of gathering, of sharing warmth and conversation, becomes an act of defiance against the pervasive gloom. This is life under a dim sun. A challenging existence, yes, but one that sculpts a new kind of human experience. It forces adaptation, resilience, and a profound appreciation for every flicker of warmth and light, however faint, however temporary. You learn to seek out the subtle variations in the gray, to find beauty in the muted tones, to value the quiet intimacy of perpetual twilight. You learn to live not just despite the darkness, but within it, shaping your world to its demands and in turn being shaped by its relentless, gray embrace. The gray embrace is not silent. As your eyes adapt, so too do your ears. The world of perpetual twilight cultivates a new soundscape, distinct and often unnerving, yet profoundly intimate. You might expect silence and oppressive hush, but what you find is a symphony of muted tones and amplified subtleties. The clamor of a brightly lit world, the distant rumble of carts on sun-baked roads, the raucous laughter carried on a clear breeze, these are gone. Replaced instead by something far closer, far more personal. Imagine yourself standing in the town square, not under a broad blue sky, but beneath a perpetual dome of ash and cloud. The air itself feels thicker, muffling distant sounds, yet allowing nearer ones to carry with an almost startling clarity. The soft scuff of a boot on packed earth, the gentle murmur of a conversation from an open doorway, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a cooper working wood in his dim shed. Each sound seems to emerge from the gloom, almost like a separate entity, drawing your attention, demanding focus. You strain to hear, your senses heightened, compensated for the diminished light. Inside the homes, this intimacy deepens. The hearth fire, a beacon not just of warmth but of life, crackles and sighs, its every spark and ember a tiny explosion in the quiet. The low hum of voices, a shared story, a lullaby whispered to a child, these sounds become the fabric of daily life. There is less shouting, less boisterous revelry. The gloom seems to encourage a quieter cadence, a more considered speech. You find yourself leaning in closer, not just to hear but to connect, to share the precious space of warmth and light with those around you. Conversations become a dance of hushed tones, secrets shared across a flickering table. The darkness itself seems to hold a million tiny secrets, or perhaps, it simply allows them to be heard. The creak of a floorboard upstairs, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of wind through a bare branch outside your window. These sounds, often overlooked in the bright light of day, now take on a new significance, a subtle poetry. They are the background hum of existence, reassuring in their familiarity, sometimes unsettling in their mystery. What was that? Was it just the house settling, or something else moving in the pervasive twilight just beyond the windowpane? This world of muted light and amplified whispers inevitably fosters a fertile ground for stories. When the sun is a memory, when the stars are forever veiled, human imagination fills the void. Around the communal fire, the tales grow longer, more vivid, more necessary. You listen intently as an elder recounts the days of brilliant sunshine, a time that feels almost mythological now. Or perhaps, stories of what lurks just beyond the familiar glow of the hearth fire, creatures of the gloom, spirits that thrive in the eternal twilight. These are not merely entertainments. They are maps for the imagination, ways to navigate the psychological landscape of a world forever shrouded. Fear, too, takes on a different hue in this perpetual dusk. It is less the sudden, sharp shock of a daytime horror, and more a creeping unease, a constant companion. The shadows are never truly dispelled, only pushed back a little by candle and lamp. What lies in those deeper, impenetrable corners? What moves beyond the edge of your vision, just at the periphery? You find yourself turning your head, listening for an unidentifiable sound, a whisper that might not be human. The world becomes a place of constant, gentle apprehension, where the line between reality and the imagined blurs with every shift of the shadows. Yet this apprehension is not all-consuming. It is tempered by the profound sense of community forged in the crucible of shared adversity. The whispers are often of reassurance, of shared plans, of quiet jokes passed between trusted friends. You learn to read faces not by the play of sunlight, but by the subtle shifts in the firelight, by the nuances in a voice. A raised eyebrow, a slight tilt of the head, a hand reaching out in the dimness. These gestures carry more weight, more meaning in a world stripped of visual extravagance. Communication becomes more visceral, less reliant on the obvious. The very rhythm of life shifts. Sleep patterns might change, dreams becoming more vivid, perhaps influenced by the constant twilight. Some might find a deep, quiet comfort in the perpetual dimness, a sanctuary from the harsh glare of a brighter world. Others might battle a persistent melancholy, a longing for the absent sun that never truly leaves them. You become acutely aware of the subtle shifts in your own mood, the ebb and flow of your spirit in response to the unwavering gray. The internal landscape becomes as important to navigate as the physical one. Even the objects you handle daily seem to carry a different resonance. A wooden spoon, a ceramic bowl, the rough weave of a blanket. Your fingers trace their contours more carefully, your sense of touch compensating for the lack of visual detail. The smell of burning peat, the damp scent of earth carried in on a draft, the lingering aroma of stew on the communal table. These sensory details are heightened, becoming anchors in a world where visual cues are so often ambiguous. They ground you, connect you to the immediate, tangible reality of your existence. This is a world where intuition blossoms, where a hunch or a feeling might guide you as surely as your eyes once did. You learn to trust the subtle signals, the faint stirrings, the unseen forces that seem to shape your days. The air itself feels charged with possibility, with the untold stories of generations living under the ash cloud. The whispers in the gloom are not just sounds. They are echoes of history, murmurs of survival, and the quiet testament to human resilience in the face of an enduring night. You carry the sounds of this place within you long after you have moved on. The memory of quiet voices, of the fire's gentle hiss, of the wind's mournful song through the shrouded trees. These are the intimate secrets of the twilight towns, secrets shared not just through words, but through the very air you breathe, the ground you walk, and the deep, abiding silence that speaks volumes. It is a world where darkness is not merely an absence of light, but a presence in itself, shaping every whispered word, every shared glance, every beat of the human heart. It is the sound of enduring life, lived in the quietest, most profound way imaginable. You have learned to live in the quietest, most profound way imaginable. But even the deepest resilience has its limits. The initial shock, the shared determination to rebuild and adapt, slowly begins to fray around the edges. What was once a challenge to be overcome becomes an oppressive certainty. This is not a temporary affliction, a season of hardship that will pass. This is your new reality, stretching into an indefinite future, a future without the direct, warming gaze of the sun. The understanding dawns slowly, like the imperceptible shift of a shadow, but once it settles, it is difficult to shake. You find yourself scanning the unchanging, ash-laden sky, a subconscious yearning for a break in the cloud cover that never comes. The bright memories of sunlit days begin to feel like faint, impossible dreams, distant echoes from another life. A deep weariness settles into your bones, not just from physical labor, but from the relentless sameness of the gray light. The very air, once charged with possibility, now seems to carry the weight of endless expectation and constant disappointment. You notice the silence changing too. No longer just profound but heavy. Empty. It is a silence that speaks of exhaustion, of the slow, insidious draining of hope. The crops, once hardy and plentiful, now struggle beneath the perpetual gloom. The soil, enriched by volcanic minerals in some ways, is suffocated by layers of fine, abrasive ash in others. What little sunlight filters through is not enough for robust growth. Your gardens yield less each season, and the struggle to find enough to eat becomes a daily, grinding reality. Hunger, once a distant threat, becomes a closer companion. Respiratory ailments become common, a persistent cough a familiar sound in every household. The ash isn't just a filter of light, it is a constant irritant, a presence in your lungs, in your eyes, clinging to every surface, a fine gray film over everything you own, everything you touch. It is in the water you drink, a faint gritty taste. It is in the clothes you wear, a perpetual dustiness that cannot be washed away. You watch as the lines deepen on the faces around you, etched by worry and the perpetual gloom. The spirited optimism that once characterized your community slowly fades. Conversations grow shorter, hushed, devoid of the laughter that once echoed through the streets. Children born into this twilight world have never known the sun, and you wonder what dreams they form in the perpetual gray. Do they imagine a world beyond the ash, or is this muted reality all they can conceive? The young, those who still remember the world before the clouds descended, start to leave, seeking light, seeking a future that feels less like an endless twilight. Each departure leaves a hollow space, a further diminishment of the collective spirit. The town shrinks not with a bang but with a slow, agonizing sigh. Houses stand empty, their windows staring blankly out at the unchanging sky. The sound of footsteps becomes rarer on the cobblestones. The roads leading out are still there, winding through the desolate landscape, but the journey feels longer, the destination less certain. You are tied to this place by history, by family, by a stubborn refusal to abandon what was once vibrant. But the vibrancy is fading. The paint peels on houses, revealing the weathered wood beneath. The public square gathers a finer layer of dust each day. Even the animals seem less energetic, moving through the muted landscape with a quiet resignation. Dogs lie curled in doorways, their tails thumping less enthusiastically. Birds, once singing at dawn, now offer only muted chirps in the gray light. Hope, once a flickering flame, becomes a smoldering ember, threatened by every gust of cold, ash-laden wind. The communal projects that once brought everyone together now struggle for volunteers. The festivals grow smaller, their music less buoyant, their colors dulled by the pervasive ash. The future, once a concept of growth and renewal, now seems to be only an extension of the present. More gray, more ash, more struggle. You begin to question the very purpose of your endurance. What are you fighting for when the enemy is not a conquerable foe, but the very sky above you, the relentless, unchanging weight of the earth itself? The quiet resignation, the deep-seated weariness, is not a sudden collapse, but a gradual, insidious seeping away of the will to actively resist. It is the slow, silent surrender to a world that simply refuses to change, a world that demands a toll that becomes too heavy to bear, day after unchanging day. The quiet endurance becomes quiet desperation, then quiet acceptance. And in that acceptance, a part of you, a part of the town, finally fades. The spirit that once burned so brightly, finding light even in the deepest shadows, becomes a memory, lost beneath the accumulating layers of time and ash. The towns that lived in eternal twilight begin to die a slow, quiet death, not from the sudden fury of the volcano, but from the relentless erosion of hope. The erosion of hope, the quiet fading of spirit, these were insidious enemies, yet not every community surrendered entirely to their grasp. Even as the human heart sometimes faltered, the human hand continued its work. You find that in these towns, amidst the accumulating layers of ash and despair, a different kind of resilience emerged. An architectural defiance, a stubborn refusal of buildings to simply collapse and disappear. Imagine standing on a street that is perpetually gray. The very air around you is thick with the residue of unseen eruptions, a fine powder that coats every surface. The challenge was not just living in the twilight, but living beneath a constant, crushing weight. Every roof was a battleground. The conventional, gently sloping roofs designed for rain and a moderate snow were simply not enough. Ash, unlike snow, compacts differently, absorbs moisture, and becomes incredibly heavy. A single heavy fall could collapse homes, burying families in an instant. So, you begin to see a transformation. Builders, driven by necessity and a profound understanding of the new enemy, started to construct roofs with dramatically steeper pitches. These were not just for aesthetics, they were engineered for survival. Angles of 45, 50, sometimes even 60 degrees became commonplace. The goal was simple: make it almost impossible for ash to accumulate. You would see these sharp, almost knife-edge profiles against the perpetually dim sky, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming natural force. But pitch alone was not enough. The surfaces themselves had to change. Rough tiles, once common, would trap ash, creating a textured grip that defied gravity. Smooth, slick materials took their place: highly polished volcanic rock, glazed ceramics, or even sheets of metal where available. The idea was to create a surface so unyielding and frictionless that the ash would simply slide off under its own weight, or with the slightest nudge of wind, minimizing the dangerous buildup. It became a daily, sometimes hourly ritual to clear these roofs, a dangerous climb into the gloom, but one that was essential for the survival of the home. The windows, once eyes to the world, underwent a profound metamorphosis. In a world of eternal twilight, where the sun was a myth and the sky a perpetually overcast canvas, what purpose did large, expansive panes serve? They were vulnerable points, easily shattered by falling debris, quickly obscured by ash and constant sources of cold and drafts. You see them shrinking, becoming narrower slits or higher-set apertures. Sometimes they were reinforced with thick, opaque glass, or even covered with sturdy wooden shutters that were rarely, if ever, opened. The outside world was not a view to be admired, but a hostile environment to be guarded against. Inside, light became a precious commodity. Homes were designed to maximize any available illumination, however faint. Walls were often painted in the lightest possible colors, pale ash gray, off-white, to reflect and amplify the dim glow from the small windows or the flickering light of oil lamps. Courtyards, once open and airy, were often covered with translucent materials, creating enclosed light wells that offered a degree of protection from the ashfall while still allowing some diffused light to filter down into the surrounding rooms. You walk through these spaces and feel a sense of intimate enclosure, a world turned inward for safety. The very materials of construction adapted. Volcanic rock, readily available, became the primary building block. Not just as a rough-hewn stone, but often finely cut, mortared with a mixture of ash and lime, creating structures that were incredibly dense and resilient. These buildings felt like fortresses, not just against human threats but against the relentless siege of the environment. Their walls were thick, offering insulation against the cold and damp, and providing structural integrity against the weight of accumulated ash on the surrounding ground. Entrances also transformed. You would rarely find an exposed doorway leading directly into a home. Instead, you encounter small antechambers, airlock-like vestibules, or raised thresholds. These were designed to prevent the ingress of fine ash dust into the living spaces. Stepping through a heavy, tight-fitting door, you would often find another inner door, creating a buffer zone where shoes could be cleaned and coats dusted off, before the outside world was truly left behind. These small architectural details speak volumes about the constant, daily struggle to keep the domestic space clean, breathable, and separate from the hostile environment outside. Even the pathways and streets of these towns showed adaptation. Exposed thoroughfares were prone to accumulating deep layers of ash, making travel arduous and dangerous. So, you would find covered walkways, arcades, and even raised platforms connecting buildings. These created sheltered passages, allowing people to move through the town with some protection from the elements, reducing the constant chore of clearing paths, and fostering a sense of community connection even in the face of isolation. This architecture of adaptation was more than just practical engineering, it was a physical manifestation of a collective spirit of endurance. Every steep roof, every narrow window, every thick wall, every enclosed passage was a choice. A choice to persist. A choice to modify, to defend, to exist in this new harsh reality. These were not towns built for joy or spectacle, but for survival. Their beauty was a stark, functional one, reflecting the tenacity of people determined to carve out a semblance of life, however muted, however shadowed, in the eternal twilight. You see the resilience etched into the very stones, a silent testament to the towns that could not simply fade away. You step beyond the protective embrace of the town's walls, leaving behind the resilient architecture you have come to recognize. The muted light, a constant companion within the sheltered passages, now spreads out before you across what was once open farmland. Here, the immediate challenge shifts from finding shelter to securing sustenance. How do you feed a community when the very source of life for plants, the sun, has been all but extinguished from the sky? The ground beneath your feet is no longer the rich, dark soil you might expect. It is often a mixture, a gritty blend of earth and fine volcanic ash, sometimes meters deep in the immediate aftermath of the eruptions. Over time, it slowly became an integral, stubborn part of the landscape. And above, the sky remains an unchanging canvas of heavy cloud and diffused gray. The world here lives in a perpetual dusk, a protracted twilight that never truly brightens into what you would call day. Photosynthesis, the miracle that transforms sunlight into vibrant growth, is severely curtailed, reduced to a whisper of its former power. Imagine the early years. The sheer desperation. Crops failing season after season. Seeds planted with hope, only to wither or produce meager, stunted yields. It was a time of immense trial and error, of rediscovering what was possible, not just in building a town but in growing food. Farmers, steeped in generations of sun-drenched knowledge, had to unlearn and relearn almost everything. Their ancestral wisdom, once a guiding light, now seemed tragically out of place in this new shadowed reality. Survival demanded radical adaptation. You would see these determined farmers experimenting with every available patch of land, meticulously seeking out hidden microclimates, even creating artificial ones. Certain indigenous plants, already accustomed to harsh, shaded conditions, rose to prominence, becoming the quiet heroes of this gray agriculture. Think of root vegetables, potatoes, turnips, carrots, parsnips. These could draw nutrients from the modified soil with less reliance on direct sunlight, their edible parts thriving beneath the earth, away from the struggle for light above ground. Their dull, earthy colors became the true colors of the harvest. But what about crops that needed more light or more warmth, or simply a different kind of environment? This is where human ingenuity truly shone, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. You would discover rudimentary greenhouses, not designed to trap intense solar heat, but rather to maximize and concentrate every precious flicker of diffused light that managed to penetrate the perpetual cloud cover. Walls would be whitewashed or covered with carefully arranged reflective materials, angled with precise, hard-won knowledge to catch and amplify the faint glow. Transparent animal bladders, painstakingly stretched parchment, or thin sheets of volcanic glass, laboriously crafted, would form the precious panes. Inside, the air would feel a touch warmer, a shade brighter, a sanctuary for more delicate greens or crucial medicinal herbs. Beyond traditional field agriculture, necessity drove exploration into less conventional food sources. Imagine venturing into the damp, shadowed forests at the edge of the settlements, or even into specially constructed underground chambers within the towns themselves. Here a different kind of bounty thrived: fungi. Mushrooms of various edible types, requiring no direct sunlight, became an increasingly important dietary supplement, providing essential nutrients and diversifying the otherwise stark diet. You would encounter dedicated cultivators tending to these subterranean farms, moving through the cool, humid air, a silent, almost sacred work performed in the perpetual gloom, ensuring a vital part of the community's food supply. And what of livestock in this world of muted light? Animals, too, suffered from the lack of light and the widespread scarcity of natural fodder. Grazing animals, once common, would be rare, unable to find enough sustenance in the sparse, stunted fields. Instead, you would find smaller, hardier breeds housed indoors or in partially sheltered pens. Chickens, pigs, and goats, sometimes even a few small, specially adapted cattle, would be fed on cultivated root crops, carefully preserved forages, or even the nutrient-rich byproducts of fungi cultivation. Their waste, in turn, fertilized the precious cultivated patches, closing a vital loop in this precarious and delicately balanced ecosystem. The keeping of animals became a careful balance, their warmth and manure almost as valuable as their meat or milk. With such unpredictable and often meager yields, food preservation was not just a convenience, it was paramount to survival. You would see every available method employed with diligent precision: drying, salting, smoking, pickling. Deep root cellars, dug far into the earth beneath houses or communal buildings, maintained a stable, cool environment for stored vegetables, providing a vital buffer against lean times. Communal smokehouses would be constantly busy, filling the muted air with the rich, pungent scent of cured meats and fish, painstakingly brought in from the often polluted rivers or what remained of the coastal waters. Every single harvest, no matter how small, was stretched, carefully rationed, and guarded as if it were pure gold. Think of the farmers themselves. These were individuals of incredible resilience, their faces etched with the perpetual worry of the next harvest, yet possessing an unwavering, almost defiant determination. They worked by the dim, flickering light of oil lamps or carefully rationed candles, their hands calloused and cracked, their bodies accustomed to the constant cold and damp air. Their connection to the land was primal, a daily, exhausting struggle against overwhelming natural odds, a silent, enduring pact with the gray earth. They understood the subtle nuances of the ash-laden soil, the precise, critical timing for planting in the brief, almost imperceptible shifts of light, the minute signs of a struggling plant that others might entirely miss. Their very existence was a testament to human will. The absence of vibrant green, the lack of a sunny, celebratory harvest festival, profoundly shaped their culture and their very spirit. Food was not merely sustenance. It was a testament to their continued existence, a hard-won victory against the encroaching darkness. Every meal, every single morsel, carried with it an immense weight of effort and sacrifice. You would feel the immense, quiet gratitude, the deep appreciation for even the simplest bowl of stew, knowing the staggering struggle involved in bringing it to the table. It was a constant, tangible reminder of their precarious yet persistent hold on life in this new, shadowed world. Farming in the gray was never a solitary endeavor. You would observe the collective spirit that pervaded these communities as essential as the food itself. Tools, rare seeds, and invaluable knowledge were shared freely and without hesitation. Labor was often pooled for large, critical tasks like clearing particularly heavy ash falls or constructing new, larger sheltered growing areas. The survival of one family's plot often depended directly on the unwavering support and cooperation of its neighbors. This shared struggle, this communal tenacity, fostered an even deeper, more profound sense of community connection than even the ingenious architectural adaptations could alone. Imagine for a moment what these lands once were: fertile valleys bathed in the golden embrace of sunlight, rich with abundant, easy harvests. Now you stand in a world stripped bare of that natural bounty, transformed by the sheer, undeniable force of nature. Yet, it stands as a living testament to humanity's stubborn, enduring refusal to yield to overwhelming natural forces. The success of a season was not measured in surplus or profit, but purely in survival. It was enough. The tenacity of a community, the sheer will to exist, these are the legacies passed down. Now shift your gaze. Imagine the small figures moving through this muted landscape. You see the children. These are the children of Twilight, born into a world where the sun is a whispered memory, a myth almost, a story told by elders. For them, the perpetual dusk is not an anomaly, but the very fabric of existence. They know no other way. Walk with them for a moment. Feel the cool, gritty earth beneath your bare feet, or the rough woven soles of your simple shoes. The air here, though often thick with fine ash, is also laden with the damp scent of growing fungi and the earthy aroma of root vegetables from the sheltered farms. Your eyes, if you were one of them, would be astonishingly acute in this low light. You would distinguish the faintest shifts in shadow, the subtle gleam on a wet rock face, the outline of a companion just a few steps ahead. Their world is one of muted colors, of deep browns, grays, and the occasional flash of green from a hardy plant nurtured under precious lamplight. Their games are different. There are no expansive fields for running beneath a wide-open sky. Instead, their play unfolds in the labyrinthine alleyways between homes, within the large, central community shelters, or in the vast, echoing tunnels carved into the earth. You hear the hushed sounds of their laughter, the soft thud of a rolled stone, the quiet pursuit of a game of hide-and-seek where the shadows are both friend and foe. Imagination here is not a luxury, but a necessity, painting vivid landscapes over the monotone reality. They fashion toys from discarded volcanic glass, polished smooth by time and touch, or from strong, knotty roots. You might see a small child meticulously shaping a miniature dwelling from mud and pebbles, mimicking the very homes that shelter them. Education for these children is not confined to formal lessons. Every action, every shared task is a learning opportunity. You watch as a young hand carefully tends a small patch of moss, understanding its role in the complex web of their ecosystem. You see older children learning to identify edible plants from the non-edible with a touch, a smell, an almost inherent knowing. They are taught the crucial rhythms of the subterranean farms, the delicate balance of water and nutrients, the importance of every single sprout. Storytelling is paramount. Around flickering oil lamps or glowing fungal clusters, the elders recount tales of the world before, of skies of brilliant blue and a giant, warm orb that cast long, sharp shadows. You listen as they describe a world you cannot fully comprehend, a world of vibrant color and relentless light. For the children of Twilight, the sun is an abstract concept. It is not something they long for they have never known its embrace. Instead, their calendar is marked by the subtle shifts in the dust, the intensity of the deepest dark, and the rituals of the community. Their comfort is found in the soft glow of the communal hearth, the steady drip of water in the cisterns, the familiar echo of footsteps on packed earth. You realize that their dreams must be filled with the muted hues of their waking lives, perhaps occasionally pierced by the dazzling, fantastical sun of the old stories. They learn to listen intently. In a world of limited visibility, sound becomes a primary guide. You notice how a child can discern the approach of an elder by the unique cadence of their steps, or detect the faint rustle of a burrowing creature far before an outsider would. The subtle creaks of the wooden supports, the distant murmur of a neighbor's conversation, these are all data points in their finely tuned sensory world. The quiet is often profound, broken only by the work of the community or the gentle sounds of the earth itself. Responsibility begins early. You observe a child no older than 6 carefully sorting harvested tubers, their small hands surprisingly deft and efficient. Another might be guiding a blind elder through a familiar passage, their movements assured and patient. There is no concept of childish idleness in this world. Every individual, from the youngest to the oldest, contributes to the collective survival. Their games often mirror these tasks, preparing them for the crucial roles they will eventually assume. You see them enacting the building of new shelters, the tending of crops, the meticulous repair of tools. Yet there is also a profound sense of wonder. You might find a child gazing up at a particularly bright cluster of bioluminescent fungi, their face alight with quiet fascination, or tracing the intricate patterns left by water erosion on a cave wall. Their world, though shadowed, is not without its own unique beauty. The glimmer of a distant mineral vein, the iridescent sheen on a beetle's wing, the intricate dance of shadows cast by a single lamp, these are the visual treasures they cherish. You realize that for them this twilight world is not lacking but simply is. It is their normal. These children grow up with a deep, almost instinctual connection to the earth beneath their feet. They understand the fragility of their existence and the strength of their community. You see the wisdom in their young eyes, a quiet resilience forged in an environment that demands constant adaptation. They are the inheritors of an incredible human story, living testaments to adaptability, community, and the sheer power of the human spirit to find not just survival, but meaning in the most challenging of circumstances. They are not merely surviving, they are building a future, one generation at a time within the eternal twilight. Their hopes, though perhaps different from yours, are no less potent, focused on the continuation of their people, the flourishing of their delicate crops, and the enduring warmth of their shared hearths. You step out of the warmth of a home, leaving behind the glow of a hearth and the quiet hum of conversation. The ground beneath your feet feels different here. It is not the familiar solid earth you know. Instead, you walk on a surface that gives slightly, a finely ground powder that whispers with each step. This is not soil, it is ash, centuries of it, layer upon layer, compressed in some places, soft and yielding in others. The world around you stretches out, a canvas painted in shades of gray. The sun, perpetually veiled, casts no sharp shadows. Instead, a diffuse, ambient light bathes everything, creating a landscape of muted tones and softened edges. You squint, not against brightness but against the strange sameness, the lack of defined forms that your eyes expect. Distant hills rise like phantom shapes, their contours blurred by the ever-present haze, their slopes draped in the same uniform gray as the ground you tread. It is a world stripped of vibrant color, a stark beauty that can feel both desolate and profoundly peaceful. You notice the textures. The ash settles on every surface, a fine velvety dust that coats the roofs of houses, the branches of stunted trees, and the very air you breathe. When the wind stirs, it lifts in ghostly plumes, dancing across the plains like silent wraiths before settling back down to reclaim its territory. You feel it on your skin, a fine grit that seems to permeate everything, a constant reminder of the geological forces that shape this place. This is the lunar landscape, a terrestrial world reshaped by fire and time, where the familiar rules of Earth seem to bend. Imagine stepping onto a different planet, one where the sky is always bruised and the ground is perpetually covered in the aftermath of a cosmic event. That is the sensation that washes over you here. The vastness is both humbling and a little unnerving. There are no expansive forests, no shimmering lakes reflecting a blue sky. There is only the ash, the muted light, and the silent, watchful presence of the volcanoes themselves, often hidden from view by their own effluence, yet always felt. You might expect silence in such a desolate place, but this landscape has its own subtle soundtrack. The soft rustle of ash when a gust of wind sweeps through. The crunch beneath your boots, a sound that echoes in the quiet air. Occasionally, the distant, muffled rumble of the earth itself, a low thrum that vibrates through the ground, a heartbeat from the slumbering giants that brought this world into being. These are not sounds of alarm, but simply part of the everyday symphony of this unique environment. Yet life persists. Not the vibrant, effervescent life you might associate with fertile lands, but a tenacious, resilient life that clings to existence with remarkable determination. You see hardy, low-lying plants, their leaves often grayish-green, coated in a fine layer of ash, pushing up through the seemingly barren ground. They are specially adapted, finding sustenance in minerals that other plants cannot utilize, drawing moisture from the deep earth. Their survival is a testament to nature's incredible adaptability, mirroring the human resilience you have already witnessed. The roads you walk are not paved or neatly manicured. They are pathways worn by generations of foot traffic, carved into the ash, often following the natural undulations of the terrain. When it rains, these pathways become slick and muddy, transforming the ash into a thick, heavy slurry that clings to everything. Then, as the sun attempts to dry it, the ground cracks into intricate, fascinating patterns, like a vast temporary mosaic laid across the land. These are the ephemeral artworks of this place, constantly forming and reforming. Consider the challenges inherent in building and maintaining structures in such an environment. Homes here are often built low to the ground, designed to withstand the occasional ashfall, their walls thick and sturdy. Roofs are sloped to allow the ash to slide off, and regular clearing is a necessary chore. Windows are small, not just to conserve heat in the cooler seasons, but also to minimize the ingress of fine dust. Every aspect of construction reflects a profound understanding of the environment and a respectful adaptation to its demands. You begin to understand why the term lunar landscape feels so apartment. There is an ethereal quality, a stark beauty that is both alien and deeply familiar to those who call it home. The air itself feels different, sometimes carrying the faint, metallic scent of volcanic minerals, sometimes merely the crisp, clean smell of cool ash. There is a purity to it, perhaps despite its particulate nature, a testament to the lack of conventional pollution that marks other parts of the world. As you gaze across this expanse, your perception of time might begin to shift. The gradual accumulation of ash over centuries, the slow erosion and reshaping of the land, the enduring presence of the volcanoes themselves. These processes unfold on a geological timescale. Human lives, individual moments, seem fleeting against this backdrop of immense, slow-motion change. Yet, within this vastness, humanity has carved out its niche, building communities, preserving traditions and finding beauty in the austere. The silence, when it settles truly, is profound. It is not an empty silence, but one filled with the weight of history, the whisper of geological forces, and the quiet determination of human life. You might find yourself listening more intently, your other senses heightened, attuned to the subtle movements of air, the faint distant calls, the barely perceptible shifts in the light. This place demands a different kind of observation, a deeper engagement with its unique reality. Even the stars, when they appear through a less hazy sky, seem to shine with an exceptional brilliance against the dark ash-filled void above. With less light pollution from the muted settlements below, the cosmos feels closer, more immediate, offering a breathtaking display that underscores the vastness of space mirrored by the vastness of the altered earth beneath your feet. It is a reminder that this lunar landscape is not isolated, but part of a larger, grander universe. You might wonder how people navigate this visually homogeneous terrain. Yet, you see the subtle markers, a unique rock formation, a slightly different shade of ash where a flow once cooled, a particular cluster of resilient plants. These are the landmarks known intimately by generations, etched into their collective memory, guiding them across paths that might seem indistinguishable to an outsider. Their map is not on paper, but in their minds and in their feet, an intuitive understanding born of intimate familiarity. The light itself plays tricks on the eye. Without sharp contrasts, distances can be deceptive. A distant peak might seem closer than it is, or a nearby ridge might recede into the haze. This constant ambiguity forces a different kind of attentiveness, a reliance on other cues. You learn to trust the subtle shifts in wind direction, the feel of the ground underfoot, the minute variations in temperature. It is a world that engages all your senses, not just sight. In this landscape, every resource is precious. Water is carefully collected, often channeled from rain or snowmelt, filtered through layers of ash. The sporadic patches of arable land are meticulously cultivated, each precious seed nurtured with dedication. There is no waste here, no casual disregard for what the earth provides, however sparingly. This environment instills a profound respect for sustenance, a deep connection to the cycle of growth and survival. You feel a sense of both wonder and humility as you traverse this world. It challenges your preconceptions of what a habitable place can be, pushing the boundaries of what you thought possible for human settlement. It is a testament to ingenuity, perseverance, and a deep-seated connection to place. The very air you breathe, laden with the history of the Earth's fiery heart, connects you to an ancient story, a continuous narrative of existence in the face of immense natural power. The silence that sometimes descends is not empty, but heavy with the slow, deliberate work of geological time. It is a silence that invites contemplation, that encourages you to slow your own pace, to observe, to listen to the faint echoes of past eruptions and the quiet resilience of the present. You are not just walking through a landscape, you are walking through time itself, experiencing a world forged in the crucible of planetary forces, and shaped by the enduring spirit of life. This is the truth of living in the lunar landscape, a constant dance with the elemental, a profound journey into the heart of adaptation. You have explored the stark beauty of worlds shaped by fire, learned of adaptation in extreme environments. Now, imagine a different kind of transformation, one that steals not the land but the very light from your sky. Think of communities not just living with volcanoes, but living within their lingering shadow, caught in an enduring twilight that stretched for months, sometimes even years. You stand on a cobbled street, not under a sun-drenched sky, but beneath a permanent, oppressive gloom. The air tastes of grit and sulfur, a constant reminder of the titanic event that cast this veil. A massive eruption has occurred, not one that unleashed rivers of molten rock upon your town, but one that hurled unimaginable quantities of ash and aerosols miles into the stratosphere. This is not night. This is something far more unnerving. This is perpetual dusk. The sun, if you can even discern its position through the thick atmospheric haze, is a mere suggestion, a faint bruise behind a heavy blanket of gray and ochre. It offers no warmth, no true illumination. The world around you is bathed in a sickly, diffuse light, never brightening, never truly fading into absolute darkness, just hanging in a monochromatic purgatory. Colors are muted, leached of their vibrancy. The familiar reds and blues of your clothes, the greens of the trees, are rendered in shades of dull gray and brown. Your eyes strain, perpetually adjusting to a light level that is always insufficient. Listen closely. The usual sounds of a bustling day are absent. There is a hushed quality to everything, as if the very air absorbs sound. Voices are softer, footsteps less emphatic. People move with a careful, almost reverent quietness, their forms silhouetted against the persistent murk. You might hear the distant ring of a blacksmith's hammer, a sound made sharper, more poignant by the surrounding stillness, a testament to continued effort in a world robbed of its primary energy source. Feel the texture of the air on your skin. It is often damp and cool, even in what should be summer. The fine volcanic dust settles everywhere, a pervasive layer on windowsills, rooftops, and the leaves of the few hardy plants that still cling to life. You wipe a hand across a window pane and leave a faint streak through the film of powder. Breathing can be difficult for some, the air heavy with microscopic particles that irritate the throat and lungs. Homes become sanctuaries against the dust and the chill. Inside, life takes on a different rhythm. Every candle, every oil lamp, every roaring fire becomes precious, a beacon against the encroaching gloom. You see flickering lights in every window, small, defiant stars in the man-made night. The scent of lamp oil, wood smoke, and damp earth fills your nostrils, replacing the fresh fragrances of a sunlit world. Meal times are illuminated by these fragile flames, casting dancing shadows on the faces of your family and friends, making every shared moment feel more intimate, more vital. The passage of time itself becomes distorted. Without the rising and setting of the sun, without the lengthening shadows or the vibrant midday glare, how do you mark the hours? Clocks become more than mere instruments, they are anchors in a temporal sea. But even then, the natural cues for wakefulness and rest are gone. Sleep patterns shift. Many find themselves struggling with a persistent lethargy, a deep weariness that seems to emanate from the very atmosphere. The natural circadian rhythms, finely tuned over millennia to the Earth's rotation, are profoundly disrupted. Farmers face catastrophe. Crops wither and die, starved of sunlight. Fields lie fallow, blanketed in ash. The vibrant green landscape that once surrounded your village is now a desolate expanse of muted gray. Hunger becomes a very real threat. Communities must adapt quickly, relying on stored provisions, foraging for anything that can still grow in the meager light, or establishing complex systems of trade with distant, unaffected regions. This is a time when ingenuity shines brightest, when every scrap of knowledge about preserving food, cultivating hardy root vegetables indoors, or building rudimentary greenhouses with what little light penetrates becomes invaluable. Children born into this perpetual dusk may never know a truly bright day for their early years. Their games are played indoors or in the muted light of the streets, their imaginations shaped by the glowing embers of the hearth rather than the vastness of the sunlit sky. Storytelling takes on an even greater importance, connecting them to memories of a brighter past, or imagining a future where the sun returns. Yet life persists. Humans are creatures of adaptation, and in these towns of eternal twilight, new customs emerge. Festivals may be reimagined, no longer celebrating the harvest in the fields, but perhaps the burning of the brightest bonfires, a collective defiance against the encroaching dark. Special lamps might be lit on significant days, their flames burning for hours as a symbol of hope and endurance. Community bonds tighten. People rely on each other for warmth, for light, for companionship, and for shared stories. Isolation in such a world is a profound terror. You learn to navigate by the familiar sounds of your village, by the contours of the ground felt through your boots, by the distant glow of a neighbor's lamp. Your other senses sharpen. The nuances of voices become more distinct. The scent of pine smoke from a chimney or the earthy smell of damp soil becomes a comforting guide. You become a pilgrim in your own home, perpetually moving through a landscape that is both familiar and fundamentally altered. Months turn into a year, then perhaps two. The initial shock gives way to a grim determination. The pilgrims of the perpetual dusk are not those who journey to a holy land, but those who endure the long, unyielding journey through time itself, waiting for the return of the sun. They carry not relics, but the memory of light, a torch passed down through generations. And then, almost imperceptibly, a change begins. One day you might notice a subtle lightening on the horizon, a faint blush of color that was not there before. The sun, still obscured, starts to exert its power, pushing back against the stratospheric veil. Each day the light grows a fraction stronger, the colors a fraction richer. It is not a sudden dawn, but a slow, agonizingly beautiful reawakening. The greens return to the leaves. The blues reclaim the distant sky. The moment the full, unfiltered sunlight breaks through for the first time in what feels like an eternity is etched forever into the collective memory. It is not just light. It is warmth, it is hope, it is a rebirth. People emerge from their homes, blinking, shielding their eyes, tears streaming down their faces, not just from the brightness, but from the sheer emotional release. The world feels new again, vibrant and alive. The towns that lived in eternal twilight are testaments to the human spirit's profound capacity for resilience. They teach you that light is not just a physical phenomenon, but a psychological necessity, a marker of time and a symbol of hope. To live without it is to redefine what it means to exist, to adapt not just to a hostile environment, but to the very absence of one of life's most fundamental gifts. You have walked with those who endured the long night, and you understand now the true elemental value of a single ray of sun. You stand now in that returning light, the warmth of physical presence on your skin. Yet, around you, the landscape tells a different story. The ash, no longer a shroud of twilight, reveals itself as a stark, oppressive blanket, burying homes, choking fields, and rendering roads impassable. The fight for survival, for normalcy, has just begun. Imagine the sheer scale of the task that confronted these communities. You step out, the air still thick with the ghost of dust, and the ground beneath your feet is not solid earth, but a deceptive layer of fine gray powder, sometimes meters deep. It is soft and yielding in places, crusty and sharp in others, an abrasive coating on every surface. Your first breath of this new post-twilight air is heavy, carrying the metallic tang of dried volcanic matter, a constant reminder of the recent past. Your home, if it still stands, is buried up to its windows, perhaps even its roof. You grasp a shovel or simply use your hands, digging into the soft, unyielding mass. Each scoop is a testament to perseverance. This is not just clearing debris, this is reclaiming your life, one heavy shovelful at a time. Neighbors work shoulder to shoulder, their faces streaked with ash, their movements slow and deliberate. The sound of shovels scraping, of muted conversations, of children crying softly, creates a grim symphony of recovery. Water is scarce, contaminated, or simply too valuable to waste on cleaning. You learn to live with the perpetual coating of ash, both indoors and out. Your clothes are gray, your skin is dry, your hair is gritty. Every meal is accompanied by a fine dusting. This is the new normal, a reality defined by the aftermath, even as the sun climbs higher in the sky each day. The fields, once fertile and green, are now barren landscapes of gray. Crops are smothered, irrigation systems choked. How do you feed your family when the very earth has turned hostile? This forces an ingenuity born of desperation. You watch as people discover new ways to cultivate. Perhaps they build raised beds, bringing in what little unaffected soil they can find from distant, less impacted areas. Perhaps they turn to the resilient wild plants that begin to tentatively poke through the ash, searching for sustenance in unexpected places. Fishing, if the rivers and coastal waters were not too heavily impacted, becomes a lifeline, a precarious gamble against nature's fury. You walk through what was once the main street of a bustling village. Now it is a narrow canyon carved through accumulated ash. The once familiar shops are indistinguishable mounds. The schoolhouse, the church, the communal well, all require monumental effort to unearth and make functional again. This is not a task for individuals, it is a task for an entire community, bound together by shared suffering and an unshakable will to survive. Observe the ingenuity. Tools are salvaged or fashioned from whatever is available. A broken cartwheel might become part of a new system for hauling ash. Discarded timbers are repurposed for shoring up weakened structures. Children, initially traumatized, find a grim game in the digging, their small hands helping to clear pathways, their laughter a fragile melody against the backdrop of destruction. Their innocence is not entirely lost, but it is certainly tempered by the gravity of their surroundings. The very fabric of daily life must be rewoven. The rhythms of the day, once dictated by agriculture or trade, now shift to the demands of cleanup and rebuilding. Mornings begin with the heavy labor of ash removal. Afternoons are spent foraging, repairing, and planning. Evenings are for shared meals, for stories, for maintaining the human connections that prevent despair from taking root. You see the elders, their wisdom now more precious than ever, guiding the younger generations, sharing tales of past hardships, reminding everyone that they have overcome before and they will overcome again. The spirit of cooperation is not merely a virtue, it is a necessity for survival. Imagine the burden on one family attempting to clear their property alone. It would be insurmountable. But when 10 families work together on one home, then move to the next, the impossible becomes merely monumental. Food is shared, water is rationed, and even the smallest victories, a cleared doorway, a repaired roof section, a garden patch showing a tentative green sprout, are celebrated by all. The psychological toll is immense, yet often unspoken. Beneath the outward displays of grit and determination lies a deep well of trauma. The memory of the eternal twilight, of the suffocating ash, of the constant uncertainty, is a shadow that lingers long after the sun returns. Nightmares are common, especially for the children. A sudden gust of wind kicking up ash can trigger panic. Yet, within this shared vulnerability, a new kind of strength emerges. You learn to rely on your neighbor not just for physical help, but for emotional support, for a quiet understanding that transcends words. These towns, scarred but not broken, became living monuments to human resilience. They redefined what it meant to endure. The experience etched itself onto their collective identity. They became people of the ash, people of the long twilight, but also people of the tenacious spirit that brought them through. The lessons learned during that period of profound darkness were passed down through generations. You see it in their architecture, in the way homes are built to withstand future ashfalls, perhaps with steeper roofs or reinforced foundations. You hear it in their folklore, in stories of heroism and cleverness in the face of overwhelming odds. You taste it in their food, in recipes adapted to available resources, honoring the resourcefulness of their ancestors. The landscape, too, begins its slow, arduous process of healing. Over months, then years, rain washes some of the ash away, carrying it into rivers and oceans. Plants with deep roots begin to colonize the barren ground, slowly breaking down the volcanic material, preparing the soil for new life. The gray begins to reseed, replaced by tentative greens and browns. But the scars remain, visible in the altered topography, in the subtle changes to the soil composition, in the very shape of the land. Yet this is not a story of defeat, but of an indomitable will to live. These communities did not abandon their homes, they fought for them. They did not succumb to despair, they cultivated hope, one shovelful, one shared meal, one whispered story at a time. They taught the world that true resilience is not about bouncing back to exactly what was before, but about adapting, transforming, and finding new ways to thrive in a world forever changed. You walk these streets now, knowing that beneath the surface of everyday life lies a profound history of struggle and triumph. You see the smiles on the faces of the descendants, and you know that their strength is not merely inherited, but forged in the fires and ashes of their ancestors' ordeal. The towns that lived in eternal twilight did not just survive. They endured, they rebuilt, and in doing so, they demonstrated the extraordinary power of the human spirit to find light, even in the deepest shadows. Their legacy is not one of ruin, but of an eternal, burning hope. You stand at the edge of town, transported to the days when the sun became a rumor. Imagine the sky, a vast, muted canvas, perpetually overcast by an unyielding veil of particulate. This was the eternal twilight, a world dimmed, where shadows stretched long and indistinct even at midday. The light, filtered and softened, robbed colors of vibrancy, transforming the landscape into a study in grays and ochres. Breathe deeply. The air carries a subtle, metallic tang, a memory of sulfur, a constant whisper of the giant that slept nearby. This pervasive dust settled on everything, clinging to clothes, frosting struggling plants, coating every surface. You feel it crunch softly under your worn shoes, each step disturbing a miniature cloud that gently resettles. This was not just dirt, it was the earth's fury, ever present, ever demanding. The most striking change, however, was sound. Or rather, its profound absence. In a world blanketed by ash, sounds were swallowed, muffled, absorbed. The usual cacophony of village life, children playing, carts clattering, a blacksmith's hammer, became muted, distant echoes, if heard at all. Instead, a new symphony emerged, one of quiet endurance. Listen closely. You hear the whisper of the wind, a gentle sigh stirring ash-laden branches, sending down a soft, continuous rain of gray powder that settles on your shoulders. You hear the muted drip of water from a roof, a sound here softened, almost shy. The scuttling of a small animal is barely audible, a rustle more felt than heard. Human sounds, too, adapted. Voices were lower, conversations conducted in closer proximity to ensure each word landed. Less boisterous laughter, more quiet smiles. The rhythm of daily life slowed, not from lethargy but necessity, a quiet reverence for the oppressive quietude. Tools made duller thuds. Steps were softer. Even the grinding of grain or chopping of wood seemed to lose sharp edges, becoming softer, more percussive echoes in the ash-laden air. Imagine homes during this eternal twilight. Windows, once portals to a vibrant world, became sources of diffused light, requiring lamps earlier and longer. Every dwelling interior bore ash's indelible mark. Despite constant sweeping, a fine layer always returned. You would run your finger along a wooden table and see the gray film resettle moments later. It was a relentless adversary, an endless chore. Living became a constant battle against the encroaching gray. The struggle wasn't just physical, it was deeply psychological. Living under a perpetually dim sky, with a constant reminder of the volcano's power, could breed despair. Yet these communities forged a resilience that transcended gloom. They found beauty in subtle shifts of light, in a single weak ray of sun that could briefly cut through the haze and illuminate green, defying the ash. They learned to read the sky's changes, interpret the wind's whispers, becoming intimately attuned to their altered environment. You see children playing, their laughter perhaps not as loud as in sunnier lands, but no less joyful. They build miniature ash mountains, tracing patterns in the soft gray dust, their faces smudged with volcanic residue, a badge of their unique childhood. Their games, infused with the reality of their world, were a playful acknowledgement of the ever-present ash. They learned to navigate dim light with innate sense, their eyes adapted to muted tones, their ears accustomed to the quiet. Their crafts and clothing began to reflect their world's color palette. Dyes were chosen that would not show the pervasive ash readily. Practicality dictated much, but even in this there was a quiet artistry. Simple patterns, earthy tones, materials that could withstand constant contact with abrasive particles. These became markers of their aesthetic. Their world was not devoid of beauty, but a beauty redefined, found in strength, adaptation, and quiet dignity. Even community rituals adapted. Gatherings might be held indoors more often, or under sturdy awnings to escape the constant ash fall. Communal meals, already a cornerstone of survival, gained added significance. Sharing food, laughter, and stories in the dim light, surrounded by the soft sounds of their altered world, reinforced bonds against the vast, quiet indifference of the landscape. Each shared moment became a small, defiant flame against encroaching shadows. This silent, ash-laden world was not one of desolation, but transformation. Resilience was not merely a concept, but a lived experience, woven into the very fabric of daily life. The people in this eternal twilight understood silence's profound power, the ash's weight, and the subtle beauty found within them. They became masters of adaptation, their senses sharpened, their spirits steeled by unique environmental challenges. As you step back from this vivid mental image, you realize these towns weren't just surviving a geological event, they were living in a fundamentally altered reality. They forged a new way of being, a new culture shaped by the volcano's breath. Their story is not just about disaster's aftermath, but humanity's profound ability to integrate with, and find meaning within, challenging environmental changes. They taught us that light can be found in unexpected places, even when the sky is perpetually gray, and that sound can resonate even in the deepest silence. Their quiet strength continues to echo through time. Their quiet strength, though enduring, concealed a deeply personal, often unspoken realm. You have walked these ash-laden streets, felt the texture of the perpetual twilight on your skin. Now, imagine a different kind of journey, one not through physical space but into the hidden landscapes of the mind. Under that constant, diffuse light, life unfolded not just outwardly in acts of survival and adaptation, but inwardly, in a tapestry of thought, memory, and aspiration. The sky, a vast, muted canvas, shaped more than just their days, it colored their very dreams. The pall was not merely a physical presence above them. It seeped into the collective consciousness, becoming a silent architect of their inner worlds. You feel it yourself as you linger here, a subtle shift in perception. Colors appear different, muted, yet somehow more profound. Sound travels with a unique clarity, or perhaps it is the lack of harsh, bright light that heightens your other senses, sharpening the edges of every whisper, every rustle of the ash-laden wind. In this diminished light, the internal world often becomes brighter, more vivid, a necessary counterpoint to the external gray. For those who remembered the time before, when the sun blazed freely in an azure sky, dreams often carried the golden hue of memory. You can almost hear their stories, passed from elder to child, of a world bathed in unfiltered brilliance, a world of sharp shadows and vibrant greens. Was it a longing, a phantom limb of light for their souls? Or did it become a mythical past, a paradise lost, a story told to remind them of the world's full spectrum, even if they could not see it? These were not just bedtime tales. They were blueprints for hope, quiet assurances that such a world had once existed and perhaps could again. The sun, a distant memory, became a powerful symbol, a dream of return that flickered at the edges of their imagination. But for those born into the twilight, the sun was an abstraction, a concept learned from stories, much like tales of dragons or distant lands. Their dreams were forged in the crucible of their present reality. What did a child born under the pall dream of? Perhaps not of a blazing sun, but of seeing the peak of the volcano clear of ash for one brief moment, or of a new resilient flower that blossomed in the dim light, its petals adapted to the muted spectrum. Their dreams were practical, yet profoundly poetic, rooted in the nuances of their unique environment. You see it in the way they carefully tend their gardens, coaxing life from the ashen soil, each small sprout a testament to an enduring hope. The pall also cast long shadows of anxiety. The volcano, though quiescent, was a constant, formidable neighbor. Its presence was a silent beat beneath the rhythm of their daily lives. Dreams could turn dark, reflecting unspoken fears. The earth rumbling once more, the sky darkening further, the suffocating embrace of new ash. You might imagine a villager waking in a cold sweat, convinced they heard the low growl of the mountain, only to find the silence of the dawn still unbroken, the ash still gently falling. These were the collective anxieties, deeply ingrained, a shared burden that bound the community not just in labor but in quiet apprehension. Yet, this constant awareness also fostered a profound sense of communal identity. Dreams were often shared, discussed in hushed tones around the warmth of a fire. They found solace in one another's company, in the shared understanding of their unusual existence. The pall paradoxically brought them closer. You notice how people linger a little longer in conversation, how their gestures are more deliberate, how their eyes meet yours with a deeper, more searching gaze. In a world where visual cues were muted, human connection became paramount, a bright light in the prevailing dimness. This intimate bond extended into their creative expressions. Storytellers, poets, and musicians found new depths in the twilight. Songs were less about the brilliance of day and more about the enduring glow of the hearth, the subtle beauty of moonlit ash, the quiet strength of shared dreams. You hear melodies that seem to echo the gentle falling of ash, harmonies that speak of both melancholy and deep contentment. Their art, often carved from local volcanic stone or painted with pigments derived from the land, reflected the muted palette of their world, yet conveyed an extraordinary richness of emotion. They found beauty in textures, in subtle variations of gray, in the interplay of shadow and faint light. Their dreams were tangible, etched into the very fabric of their cultural output. Consider the dreams of innovation. Living under the pall demanded ingenuity. Perhaps they dreamed of new ways to cultivate crops in low light, of specialized tools for filtering the air, of architectural designs that maximized the scarce light filtering through the ash clouds. These were dreams born not of a desire to escape their reality, but to thrive within it. You see evidence of this everywhere. Cleverly designed skylights, intricate ventilation systems, and farming techniques passed down through generations, all born from a collective dream of resilience and flourishing. The pall also gave rise to a unique philosophy, a different way of understanding time and existence. Without the clear demarcation of bright day and deep night, time might have felt more fluid, more eternal. Days blended into days, marked less by the sun's journey and more by the rhythms of community life. The quiet hum of work, the gathering for meals, the stories told as the faint glow outside deepened to near darkness. You perceive a different cadence to life here, a slow, deliberate pace that allows for deeper introspection, for moments of quiet contemplation. Their dreams, whether of a forgotten son or a thriving future, whether tinged with fear or bright with hope, were all woven into the unique tapestry of their lives beneath the ash. They taught us that the human spirit does not require constant illumination to dream vividly. Sometimes in the quiet dimness, amidst the falling ash, the inner light shines brightest. You feel it in the air, a sense of profound peace coexisting with an underlying hum of memory and aspiration. This unique environment fostered a deep appreciation for the ephemeral, for the subtle shifts in light and shadow, for the delicate balance of life that perseveres against formidable odds. Their dreams were not always grand or revolutionary. Often they were simple, profound desires. For a healthy child, for a good harvest, for a moment of quiet joy shared with loved ones. These small, persistent dreams, nurtured beneath the constant pull, formed the bedrock of their extraordinary resilience. You realize that these towns, existing in eternal twilight, were not just surviving, they were evolving. Their dreams were the engine of this evolution, shaping their society, their technology, their art, and their very understanding of what it means to be human. They demonstrate that dreams are not merely escapism. They are essential tools for adaptation, for finding meaning, for building a future even when the present seems shrouded. Their legacy, then, is not just one of survival but one of enduring imagination, a testament to the power of the mind to envision light even when the sky is gray. They remind you that even beneath the thickest pall, the human spirit continues to dream, to aspire, to build, drawing strength from an inner wellspring that no external darkness can extinguish. For generations, the sun was a concept, a memory, a warm glow depicted in ancient murals or whispered in lullabies. Life was calibrated to the eternal twilight, a world where the brightest day was a perpetual overcast morning. Yet, the human heart, powered by that inner wellspring you have witnessed, could not entirely relinquish the yearning for a different light. The promise of a new dawn, once an abstract comfort, began to take on a new, fragile form, born not of myth, but of meticulous observation and an unwavering belief in possibility. You walk through the shrouded settlements and you sense a shift, a subtle quickening in the air. It is not a dramatic change, not a sudden parting of the volcanic clouds. Instead, it is found in the quiet corners where the most dedicated minds of these twilight towns have been at work for centuries. They are the sky watchers, the dust measurers, the thermographers of the gloom. Their observatories are not grand domes pointed at stars, but shelters designed to measure the most minute shifts in the pervasive pall. You notice a peculiar device near a public square, protected by a simple wooden frame. It is a light accumulator, a series of intricately layered plates designed to capture and magnify the faintest traces of solar radiation that penetrate the atmosphere. The measurements, meticulously recorded on treated parchment, show an almost imperceptible upward trend. Not every day, not every week, but over decades, over centuries, a pattern begins to emerge. The line on the graph, once flatlining in despair, now shows a gradual, hesitant ascent. You learn that the promise is not of instant brightness, but of fractions of a lumen, of a barely discernible lightning in the deepest part of the day. The air, once thick with microscopic ash that clung to everything, seems to carry slightly less particulate matter. Specialized filtration systems, which once strained to keep the air breathable, now register minute improvements in their operational efficiency. The telluric currents, those subtle electrical pulses within the earth, are monitored with increasing precision. Seismologists, whose ancestors once braced for constant tremors, now record longer intervals of quietude between the deep rumbles. The giants, the sleeping volcanoes that had birthed this age of darkness, seem to be sighing less deeply, stirring with less frequent intensity.